through some real basic sort of back-end design skills when it comes to programming a game. We're just going to keep it simple. We're going to look at Scratch to begin with, and then if we have some time, we'll look at a Unity script. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this little simple game design idea that we have, something real simple to implement, whack-a-mole, basically. A simple thing where you just hit this thing that keeps moving. The more times you hit it, the higher your score goes. You've got sort of a set time limit before the game eventually ends. And you just want to try and get the highest score you can. So what we're going to do is quickly look at this design and try and convert it to something we can implement in Scratch. And if we have time, we'll look at a Unity script I prepared ahead of time that sort of implements the exact same thing. And it's still pretty simple. So the idea of the game here, whack-a-mole, it's going to be a little bit different to traditional whack-a-mole where there's multiple moles popping up and you hit them all. So this is basically, we'll have a little object that sits on the screen. We'll have a score somewhere. As soon as you click on that object, it will randomly move somewhere else. And you just keep clicking away as fast as you can, getting your score up and up as the timer sort of ticks down, or in our case, what we'll do is we'll have a timer that increases, and we'll have a piece of data we can set to say how long we want the game to last for. So you can sort of challenge each other by having your friends play it with a different time limit type of thing. So what I've got here on this little diagram sort of lists the basic idea of the game. So if you're designing a game, this is what you do. You'd quickly write down your couple of things of what you want to happen in the game, and then you would try to identify the things in the game that are objects, which is variables, pieces of data. In this case, I've picked out the actual thing I click on. That's something that's got to move around. And the score needs to be a little number that I store somewhere. And the timer itself, the timer needs to keep doing its thing. And when we make games, we need to design all these different little pieces, like what are the things in my game? But then we need to think of what you do with the things in your game. So I've also written down sort of the basic events that happen in my game. One is sort of a mouse click. So I'm going to have it when I click on something, it moves. So that would be an event. In this case, when the mouse clicks on the item, if I've clicked on the actual object that I'm trying to hit, my score goes up and the thing moves. And that's all that action really has to do. It doesn't do much else. It just gives me a score, moves it around. So the other action that happens in the game is a constant action that keeps happening, sort of a loop, where it would check the time against how much time the game lasts for. And if that time limit is reached, then print game over and restart the game. So that's what we're going to look at in Scratch. So I'll just switch on over to Scratch and we'll see how it all goes. So let's see, over to Scratch now. Blah, there we go, clicking the wrong buttons. So I'm in Scratch. Scratch is a very simple thing for testing out basic ideas. So I'll just go create. We end up with a sort of a blank screen that just has this cat object in the middle of it. So we're going to go with sort of a cat catcher type game. We'll try and click on the cat and it'll give us a score. So there's a few things we need to do in Scratch. I mean, we've got one object, the cat, so that's the thing we're going to try and catch. But we also need a piece of data to store our score. And I'm going to store it just in the cat itself. So for that, in Scratch, I can go to data, and I can make a variable. A variable is just a thing that changes over time if you want. Like it could be a number that's equal to 5, and then we make it equal to 6. Or it could be someone's name. Their name is Jack or their name's Sally. Variables can be lots of different things. So I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to create it for that sprite only. And I'm going to call it score. So now the little cat has a score, and the score shows up in the top corner here. So what I need to happen now is an event for when I click on the cat, score goes up. So there's a few different things. For that, you can go to events, and there's a whole bunch of different events that are things that can happen. And one of these events is when you click on a sprite. So with that sprite selected, and the sprite is what the cat is, I can just go, okay, when the sprite's clicked, you drag it over to your workspace. And when it is clicked, that's when I want certain things to happen. So I basically want my piece of data to change. So I can go to data again, and then there's all these different options I can choose to modify things. And one of them says I can change the score by 1. Perfect. I'm going to put that in there. So when the sprite is clicked, change the score by 1. And I can click on him, and the score goes up. Awesome. Simple. But the other thing I need to happen is I need the cat to move around everywhere. So I need to start applying some motion to this cat. So you can go to the motion, and there's a whole bunch of different things in here where you can set variables to certain numbers. So the cat itself already has some. The cat has data that says where the cat is, and that's its X and its Y. So in this list of things I can do, the motion I can change, there's a couple here where I can go set X to a number, and I can set Y to a number. And Y is going to be how high it is, and X is going to be whereabouts left and right it is. So I could very easily just go, okay, cool. I'm going to grab the set, and I'll grab a set Y as well. So I've got set X and I've got set Y. And what I can do with these is I can give it an exact number to go to, or I can give it random numbers for it to use. So I can have it pick a random number for me. Perfect. So under operators, we have this option called pick random number, and it will give you a random number between a certain number and another number, kind of like a dice rolls between 1 and 6. So I can go, cool, pick random number, and I can slot it in here. I can pick another random number and slot it in. And this screen, how big our screen is, in the middle is 0. We can go to negative 240, I think it is in Scratch. Scratch has some weird settings. So I can go, okay, negative 240. I can go 240 there, and up, down, I think is 180. So I can go negative 180, positive 180. Something's happened with my scene. I think my stream has just gone a little wacky. Aha, I'm back. Sorry, things went a little weird there with my scene. Okay, so what I've got here, I've got my random number. I'm going to go, like I was talking about. So now when I click on this cat, he's going to move around all over the place. Because we've set it up when the sprite's clicked, change the score by 1, which it does, but also set its position to random positions. So it should be able to move all over the place, which it is. Awesome. So that's the first part of our little challenge. We can have a score go up and it can move it around. But now we need the next little piece of our game, which is setting it up so that when the game's running, the timer changes and we eventually game over once a certain time limit's reached. So I can put this aside for now. I'm just going to slide it down the bottom out of the way a little bit. And I'm going to add a new event. And the event's going to be when the flag's clicked, because I can treat the flag as the game running. And I need to set up a few different things. I want this game to constantly run forever. So under control, I can find this thing that's called a loop, which will loop forever. Awesome. So that's going to be my game. Inside there will be what happens when the game starts, and then the timer changing, and then once the time is done, game over, go back to the start. So to do all this, what I might want to do is I might want to set the position of the cat back to 0. So if I click this flag, the cat goes back to 0. Great, that's the first little step I want when the game starts, but my score is still actually quite high from all the times I've clicked on it. So what I need to do is also set the score back to 0 when the game starts. So I can do that and go set the score back to 0, done. Other little things I might want to start to do now. I need something to keep track of how long the game goes for. I need a variable, I need another variable. So I'm going to go, okay, for this sprite only, I can go time limit. Now if I untick it, it won't show up over here. So I've got my time limit. So I can set the time limit now to 0, so it starts the timer. Or it sets it to, not starts the timer, it sets it how long I want my game to go for. So I want it to go for 30 seconds, will be good. So 30 seconds. So now what I want to do is actually start a timer. So if I go to sensing, there's a whole bunch of different things in here, including a timer. And the timer just shows this little number that counts up and counts down, so you can turn it on to see it. But I can reset the timer, so I'm going to reset it back to 0 when the game starts. And now what I want to do is I want this cat to say that the game's starting. So there's underneath the look tab, there's all these different things you can do, including have the cat say something for a certain amount of time. So I want the cat to say game on for 2 seconds. So yay, game on. Or actually I'll change it to say catch me. So when our game starts, the cat says catch me for 2 seconds. And then it all keeps looping and it keeps going over and over and over, and it keeps restarting, which is why it's saying catch me. So what I instead want to do, I want to add a wait, where it waits for something. So I can have it wait until the timer is bigger than our game time limit. So I can go wait until, and then this little weird shape allows me to sort of add different options in here. So I can go operators, and I want wait until, and we've got these different mathematical things. So I'm going to go wait until, I go back to sensing, I slide timer in here, and what I've got is it now goes wait until the timer is bigger than the time limit. So this is going to put everything in the middle of the screen, set the timer to start off, and it's going to keep counting, and it is counting up. And then after the time limit's reached, so after 30 seconds, it all restarts. But what I want it to do is to say, once the game's over, that the game's over. So I'm going to add after the wait, I'm going to have it say game over for 2 seconds. So if I now change, I'm going to change my time limit down just to something like 10 seconds so we can see that it's working. And if I start it, I can now click on it. Score keeps going up every time I click. And after 10 seconds, game over, my score was 12. And then it starts all over again. So what I've done is I've basically taken my really simple design for a game, the whack-a-mole, and I've implemented it into Scratch. It works. It's not the most amazing game, but it's a simple way to take a basic idea that you can just write out on paper, identify the individual little things in your game and what it is you want your game to do, and then in Scratch you can write them in these simple little blocks. You can put the logic in there. It's a little bit more complex than what I had written down on paper, but code does become more complex. What we've got written on paper is what you would call pseudocode, where it outlines the idea that you want to implement, and then what you actually implement probably end up being a little bit more complex. Now, just really quickly to end this off, what I could do is also show you what this would look like written as a Unity script. So I have this big Unity script, which I've written as a catcher. I've called it catcher. So this is a behavior that you would add to the cat in Unity. So the cat would be a game object that you put in your scene. You make it look like something pretty, and you have the camera set up to look at it, and we could attach this behavior to it. So this behavior has the same sorts of variables that Scratch did. I have a time limit that's made public so that in Unity, in the editor, I can change how long the game goes for. And then I have another couple of variables that are keeping track of the timer, keeping track of the score, and also I'm keeping track of if the game is over or not. So that's one thing that we didn't have in Scratch that I need to put here. I don't need anything in Start. And if I go down, I'm just going to skip over some code for the moment, to this mouse on mouse down, well, that's basically the when the sprite is clicked event from Scratch, but now it's in Unity when I click on a game object. So if the game's not over and I click on it, increase the score by 1. And I'm changing the position of the object by moving it around in a random spot by -5, +5, -5 down, +5 up. So I'm sort of moving this object around. You've got to click on it as quick as I can. Score keeps going up. During update, which is basically the loop that keeps on going forever, the timer goes up based on how much time has passed. That's what delta time is. If you've used Unity, you would probably know what delta time is. If the time limit is, if the time is bigger than the time limit, then the game's over. But I've got this little bit down here as well where if the game's over and the timer is actually bigger than the time limit plus 5 seconds, so I'm given this little 5-second delay once the game's over, then make it so the game's not over, set my score back to 0, timer back to 0, put the position back at 0, and I've reset the game and it starts happening again, just like we've got in Scratch. And then to print out on screen, I have this little on GUI thing, so if the game's over, it's going to print that the game's over, sort of taking up a big spot on the screen. Otherwise, I'm printing onto the screen as like a real basic GUI what the score is. So you can click on the thing and the score goes up. The object keeps moving. Could be a cat, could be a box, could be a picture of your teacher. You click on them and they keep moving around. You get a higher score based on how fast you click on them. But that is taking my really, really simple design and converting it into something that can work in Unity and in Scratch. So I think that's kind of it as a real simple stream. Sorry for the weird little mix up in the middle of it where it all went to black. But taking a basic game idea, converting it to something in code, no matter what you use, isn't too tricky. The main thing is design your idea first, identify what pieces you want to actually put in your game, the things you have to code up, and then start coding. Don't start coding with an idea in your head and you code on the fly. That's a very bad way to work, and that's why all your favorite video games get delayed by like a year or so. Plan everything at the start, and when you make it, it takes no time at all to make it. So that's it from me, and yeah, I hope that was a little bit informative. We've got more sessions coming up that should help you out with different types of things in STEM. And yeah, I'm out. Later off.